You should hear what keeps him up at night.
This is what keeps me up at night. I don't understand how my fellow Americans, I don't even understand how this election is close. And yes, I'm voting for you, but I would also vote for that wall over there.
Well, he's half right. We do need a wall. You know, to keep out gang members, fentanyl dealers, human traffickers, and Anna Navarro. What's funny, though, is that Stern actually thought that was a compliment. Stern has become such a wussified sycophant, he doesn't realize that telling Kamala that he'd vote for a wall is telling her that he knows she's as dumb as one.
Howard Stern built his empire on shock, rebellion, and tearing down the establishment. But when Greg Gutfeld turned the spotlight on him, the silence that followed was deafening. Stern, the man who once thrived on confrontation, offered no comeback, no verbal firestorm, just an awkward pause that felt louder than words. Gutfeld didn't simply point out Stern's transformation. He ripped it open and displayed it for the world to see, branding the former rebel king as nothing more than a sellout. For decades, Stern was the outlaw of media, the voice that spat in the face of polite society. Yet here he was, being out-rebelled by a host who thrives on sarcasm rather than shock.
That's how Stern can call snacking with celebs at a fancy restaurant exhausting. Exhausting. Like he finished the overnight shift in a coal mine, or hearing Kat talk about her pets.
It's fair.
But I get it, life is tough, especially when you've been cut off from the world for 2 years in a $20 million beach house. I mean, you have no idea how tiring it is walking all the way from the wine cellar to the tennis court and back.
Gutfeld knew exactly where to strike, exposing Stern's slow slide from raw defiance into comfortable conformity, and the audience felt every cutting word. Imagine the king of controversy reduced to a polite celebrity interviewer, sipping with A-listers and tossing softball questions. It was a staggering fall from grace. Stern once mocked elites with reckless abandon, but now he dined with them, praised them, and painted himself as exhausted from living the kind of privileged life most people can only dream about. Exhausted, he said, as though he had worked a brutal overnight shift in a coal mine, when in reality he was trudging from his wine cellar to his tennis court in a mansion by the sea. Gutfeld didn't need to raise his voice or thunder insults. His power came from precision, dissecting Stern's hypocrisy like a surgeon with a scalpel. The irony was devastating. The man who built his empire by exposing phoniness now wore the very mask he once tore from others. This clash wasn't just a television moment. It was a cultural collision, the kind that marks a turning point in how audiences see their icons.
But it is incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then they went woke. It's not a chicken or egg thing there. You know what order it came. So I call this BFR. It's blackface reparations. There's nothing in Stern's previous career that could withstand this modern witch hunt that he now embraces. So this is a form of restitution. Maybe he says, you know, if I'm woke too, the crocodile will eat me last. But they always do eat. But I get it. He flipped from populist to elitist because now he's with elitists.
Before we go deeper, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. For years, Stern carried the crown as the king of all media. But Gutfeld showed the world that the crown had slipped, and perhaps it was time for someone new to wear it. The contrast was stark. Stern, who once shocked censors and terrified executives, now spoke softly, eager for the approval of the same elites he once ridiculed. Meanwhile, Gutfeld leaned into the confrontation with calm confidence, presenting himself as the true heir to the rebellious mantle Stern abandoned. Stern's defenders tried to argue it was growth, maturity, evolution. But the audience could see the truth. This wasn't growth. It was surrender. What made the moment cut even deeper was Stern's silence. This was the man who built his career on fast comebacks and savage takedowns, suddenly left without a word. The lack of response wasn't just noticeable. It felt like confirmation that Gutfeld's strike had landed too hard to counter. Social media erupted with clips and commentary.
I will say this, Dagan. I thank God for Howard Stern because he does make me feel normal by comparison. Because I'm like the Fox recluse. I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere. But he makes me look like, Pete Davidson on a...
Yeah, he's a germaphobe. Like, his wife rescues cats. That's her job, apparently, her thing. But you can get toxoplasmosis.
That's true.
Cryptosporidiosis.
AIDS.
And
no, you can't.
no,
But
you can't get.
No, you can't.
But you can get.
I mean, what are the chances I get that again?
Like a lot of diarrhea related.
Viewers who had once idolized Stern admitted that Gutfeld had voiced what they themselves had quietly thought for years. The king of rebellion had lost his edge, and in the unforgiving world of media, there's no harsher critic than your own legacy staring back at you. And as the segment ended, the silence of Howard Stern lingered longer than any of his old punchlines ever did, a haunting reminder of what happens when the rebel becomes the system. What made Gutfeld's takedown so brutal was that he didn't come at Stern with anger or over-the-top theatrics. Instead, he approached it with cold precision, almost clinical in the way he dissected Stern's decline. That calm delivery only amplified the sting, as though he was holding up a mirror and forcing Stern to confront what he had become. Once upon a time, Howard Stern was the man who pushed the boundaries of taste, who defied the FCC, who dared to say what no one else would. He thrived on chaos and built his reputation as the voice of rebellion. But Gutfeld revealed how that voice had changed, softened, and ultimately blended in with the very system it once attacked. Stern had shifted from the firebrand who spit on the red carpet to the host who rolled it out for celebrities. That transformation wasn't framed as maturity.
On his radio show, Howard Stern defended wokeism, saying it's a compliment when someone calls him woke. Listen.
If woke means I can't get behind Trump, which is what I think it means, or that I support people who want to be transgender, or I'm for the vaccine, dude, call.
Gutfeld painted it as betrayal. Betrayal of the audience, betrayal of the brand, and most of all, betrayal of the rebel legacy Stern himself built. When Stern defended wokeism and praised the label, it was the final straw. Gutfeld seized on it, mocking the idea that Stern, who once made his fortune by offending everyone, now proudly embraced conformity. It was an irony too sharp to ignore, and Gutfeld wielded it with ruthless clarity. What made the audience buzz was how naturally Gutfeld embodied the qualities Stern once had. He was sarcastic, unapologetic, and unafraid to torch sacred cows. His commentary wasn't just entertainment, it was rebellion in real time. In contrast, Stern seemed like a relic of a bygone era, clinging to a throne that no longer existed. Stern's defenders tried to argue that he had simply grown older, that he was tired of fighting battles he had already won. But growth doesn't look like surrender, and it certainly doesn't look like cozying up to elites you once demolished on air. In Gutfeld's world, selling out is the ultimate sin, and Stern, once the high priest of rebellion, now looked like its most famous casualty. The audience didn't need to be convinced. They saw it with their own eyes. Stern's silence was telling.
But Stern being holed up in his house that long, it explains a lot of things. like how you forget how other people live, especially in hard times like a pandemic. For the longest time, 2 years in fact, the same time Stern's been AWOL, I wondered where he went. Not physically, but mentally. I bet you did too. Remember his screeds about COVID? They were epic and angry, and not to mention wrong.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated? F them, f their freedom. I want my freedom to.
This was the man who used to dominate conversations, who would steamroll critics with sharp comebacks and savage insults. Yet when confronted by Gutfeld's critique, he had nothing. No words, no fire, no fight. The rebel king suddenly looked like a man without armor. Social media wasted no time in amplifying the moment. Clips of Gutfeld's segment went viral, sparking debates across Twitter, YouTube, and every corner of the internet. People who had long felt disappointed in Stern finally had their frustration validated. The torch had been passed or ripped away before their very eyes. It wasn't just a personal attack. Gutfeld had framed it as a cultural indictment. Stern, he argued, hadn't changed out of conviction, but out of convenience. He wasn't standing up for beliefs. He was protecting his seat at the table, and that made the fall even more scandalous. The contrast between the two men could not have been clearer. Stern represented a legacy of rebellion gone soft. Gutfeld represented a new wave of irreverence, sharper and more adaptable to a digital world where sarcasm is the weapon of choice. The old shock jock had been replaced by the new sarcastic sniper.
Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Oh my God.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
So a guy who's supposed to be funny for a living now claims her candidacy is too important to joke about. This is a guy who once joked right after the Columbine massacre that the killers should have raped the students before killing them. Not that I like that Stern, but this pendulum swing from saying the most tasteless thing in the universe to putting your balls in a Tic Tac container. You gotta wonder what's going on here. It's striking that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever now turns into a breathless over a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate.
What stung most was that Gutfeld didn't have to exaggerate. He didn't have to invent flaws. He simply described Stern's transformation, and the picture spoke for itself. That was the brilliance of the strike. It was subtle, devastating, and undeniable. Stern's silence wasn't strength. It wasn't defiance. It was confusion, and audiences sensed it. They knew they weren't watching a rebel ignoring his critics. They were watching a legend caught off guard, unsure how to fight back without contradicting his carefully crafted new image. The media landscape has always thrived on clashes, but this one felt different. This wasn't just two personalities sparring. It was two eras colliding. Stern represented the analog rebellion of shock radio. Gutfeld embodied the digital insurgency of meme-ready mockery. One was fading, the other was rising. And while Stern's fans struggled to defend his transformation, Gutfeld's audience grew louder, celebrating him as the man who dared to say what others tiptoed around. He didn't just punch at Stern. He punched at the entire idea that rebellion could survive once it became comfortable. That's what made the takedown unforgettable. It wasn't just about Howard Stern the man. It was about what Stern symbolized.
Happy Friday, America! Oh man, tonight is a special night. It's Feminine Friday, where all the panelists are women. Tonight we have Kennedy. Yeah! David McDowell. Pat Tim. And Janine Garofalo. All right.
Truth
A
about
long way
cats and
for a
dogs.
mean joke. Okay, I hope you had a good week. I did, and no thanks to Howard Stern. True, the New York Post reported that Stern hit a chic restaurant in NYC with a crew of A-listers, including Jimmy Kimmel, Jennifer Aniston, John Hamm, Justin Theroux, Jason Bateman. I was not invited. I guess
The decline of authenticity when fame and fortune soften the sharp edges that once defined you. In that sense, The Clash was more than entertainment. It was a warning. Even the fiercest rebels can lose their edge. Even the loudest voices can go silent. And when that happens, someone new will rise to fill the void. Greg Gutfeld wasn't just mocking a radio legend. He was staking a claim that the throne of rebellion had been left unguarded, and he was more than ready to sit on it. What cut the deepest wasn't Gutfeld's humor, but his ability to hold Stern accountable to his own legacy. He reminded the audience of the man Stern once was, the firebrand who mocked the establishment and ripped apart phoniness, and then forced them to compare that image to the polished, careful Stern of today. The gap was undeniable. Stern's defenders claimed that it was unfair, that people change with time. But the more they argued, the more obvious it became that change wasn't the issue. The issue was authenticity. Stern didn't evolve into something new. He abandoned the very qualities that made him who he was. The man who once thrived on offending sponsors and shocking audiences now seemed obsessed with approval.
Stern got even more pathetic, wondering how she doesn't nap.
When you said you don't nap, I get it, because like what you've taken on is extraordinarily difficult. And I mean, do you feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you. I want it to go well for the country.
Hold on. I need a minute.
This definition of woke, it's if you call someone a know-it-all, you're not complimenting them on the breadth of their knowledge. Yeah. You're saying you don't know as much as you think you know. So, yeah, woke doesn't have anything to do with vaccines. What it really means is sort of a slavish devotion to left-wing ideology and then repeating it so you can get social credit.
Right.
That's really what it means.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're smarter than anybody. And he had said in another part of this set, because I believe in the science. Well, if you believed in the science, you wouldn't be hiding out like Howard Hughes in your mansion. So
As days passed, the viral wave didn't slow down. Commentators, podcasters, and YouTubers dissected the moment, each adding fuel to the fire. For many, it wasn't just about Stern or Gutfeld. It was about the question of whether anyone can stay a rebel forever. Stern's fall wasn't just personal. It was philosophical. It asked whether rebellion is sustainable once you're accepted into the very circles you once fought against. The answer, for many, seemed clear. Howard Stern's silence became the punchline. The man who once defined confrontation was now defined by his refusal to confront. And in that vacuum, Gutfeld's voice grew louder. The irony was cruel, but unavoidable. The self-proclaimed king of all media, once feared for his raw power, was now dethroned not by scandal, not by outrage, but by something far simpler, the truth of his own transformation. What audiences witnessed wasn't just a feud. It was a handoff, whether Stern wanted it or not. The torch of rebellion, once burning in Stern's hands, now glowed in Gutfeld's grip. And that was the scandalous beauty of the clash. It wasn't staged. It wasn't forced. It was the raw passing of an era, the moment when one rebel became the establishment and another stepped in to take his place. In the end, it wasn't about who was louder, funnier, or sharper. It was about who still felt authentic. And in that moment, Greg Gutfeld emerged as the voice that dared to say the unsayable, while Howard Stern, the old king of shock, faded quietly into the silence he once despised.